This week on Head to Head, I review The Rise of Kylo Ren issues number 1 and 2, a new Star Wars comic series, and it starts right now.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel, and, well, as you can see, I'm the only one here this week. Unfortunately, Darryl came down with a really bad case of bronchitis. And if you guys have ever had any kind of respiratory infection at all, like bronchitis, pneumonia, and all that, you know how that could just completely knock you down. And in fact, Darryl was actually going to try to be here this week, but he went to the doctor, and it's like, nah, man, you got to rest. You got to take it easy. You can't, push yourself too hard or anything like that. So he wisely stayed away. But there's so much Star Wars stuff that we can talk about that we didn't really want to cancel the show. So I'm here, and we're going to get right to it. So let's go to the Cantina. All right, well, first up in the Cantina, unfortunately, we have to start with a sad note. We lost the actor who played Bossk this past Wednesday. His name was Alan Harris. I mean, a lot of us aren't really familiar with a lot of these supporting guys, which is unfortunate because actually, as much as we love the main characters and, all the actors who bring just so much to their characters. I mean, when you think of somebody like Harrison Ford, and we found out when Alden Ehrenreich played Han Solo, the young Han Solo, in Solo, got to get this straight, a Star Wars story, it was good, but it wasn't the same thing, and it just wasn't Harrison Ford. And I think that we all agree that Harrison Ford really did bring something, I mean, I hate to say it, but almost magical to that role. And it's the same thing with a lot of these guys, these supporting characters. I mean, you might look at it and say, okay, in the movies, we've seen Bossk exactly one time. And that was when he was standing on the bridge of the Star Destroyer and, Vader was talking about how, he was going to hire somebody to get the Millennium Falcon or whatever. And it's like, yeah, you could say that, okay, this guy just stood there basically. But when you really stop and think what it takes for these actors to emote or, to do any of this stuff, when they're wearing all this latex and, prosthetics and all these, all these costume pieces and everything. It's interesting. I'm still reading it, but I'm about halfway through the IMC3PO book by Anthony Daniels. I don't know if you guys have read that or not. But if you haven't, you really should, because it's a great book. And it really talks about, particularly in A New Hope, how Anthony Daniels had to just really come up with the C-3PO character. Because first of all, the costume that he had to wear was not quite as high-tech as what they're making now. And it was really hard for him to move. He couldn't go downstairs. He didn't really know too much about the character. And they actually wanted Richard Dreyfuss to play C-3PO or to voice him. And they went through a bunch of other voice actors or whatever. And finally, they settled on Anthony Daniels. Even though he was the guy in the suit, they didn't really want him to, they didn't want C-3PO to be like a British butler or whatever. So it ended up being that they decided, no, I guess he's the right choice or whatever. But it just goes to show you that, acting in just layers and layers of costume is not an easy thing. And so Alan Harris, who not only played Bossk, he played a couple other characters in the original Star Wars trilogy. I don't know who they were offhand. I can't remember because I'm just getting this news pretty much as we're going on. I happen to be reading, before going on, and it's like, oh man, he passed away. That's too bad. I think we ended up posting something about it on our Facebook page. So check out our social media at Head to Head SW if you guys haven't already done so. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell for more videos because we're going to do a whole bunch of other stuff. So, our condolences go out to the family and the friends and all of us fans of Alan Harris who, really appreciate the work that he did. After all, he is part of the Star Wars family. So now next, though, we have something it's actually been on the horizon for a while, but I think we all forgot about it. It's the Project Luminous thing that's going on. There's a lot of kind of a mystery about this whole thing. First of all, a lot of people are confused on what it is. So just so you know, we're going to get this announcement on February 24th. And they're going to talk all about it. There's going to be release dates. There's going to be a lot of information. But from what I've gathered so far, Project Luminous is going to be a yet-to-be-revealed Star Wars story that takes place across books, comics, maybe even TV and movies, who knows. But it's going to go all across the universe, across formats, and it's going to be this whole cross-platform kind of thing. I think it's even going to be in games or something. But I've been curious for a while now. I'm not entirely sure what this is going to entail. In fact, I'm not even sure what time period this is going to be in. If you guys have any ideas or maybe you have any information, leave it in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. But I find this intriguing, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that Lucasfilm is learning more and more now that the movies are not just the gold standard of what Star Wars has to be. Okay, Star Wars, because of The Mandalorian, they're finding out that television, for instance, is a great platform for it. I said it a long time ago that the novels are amazing. Yes, you have some bad ones. Yes, there are ones that they probably should forget about or shouldn't have been written, because they get a little silly and they're just not very well written. But there's a lot of really, really good novels out there. And if you guys haven't checked them out, you really should give them a chance because, and I'll go into this a little bit later in another segment, but a lot of the new canon novels actually have really good storylines. And not only that, they're written very well. Because that's one of the things that you find with a lot of these franchise books is they're almost written like, I don't know, like cheap novels maybe. I was going to say comics, but a lot of the comics are really well written too. So, you just have to take the good with the bad. But the new canon novels, for the most part, I don't remember anyone that was really bad. They've all been really good, and there's something that I think are definitely worth checking out. But with this Project Luminous, it's really difficult to say what it's going to be in totality because, like I said, it's covering this whole wide range, and it's been under a shroud of secrecy for quite some time. But nevertheless, I'm looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to seeing, how they're going to do this when it comes to structuring the next batch of films. Because remember, they're still on track to do another movie, I think in 2022 or something like that. We're not sure if it's Kevin Feige that's doing it. We're not sure if, who was it? Well, of course, we have the Rian Johnson trilogy that's still out there somewhere, and we have no idea what that's going to be about. But I think that if Lucasfilm is doing what I always hoped they would do, which is to plan everything out, right? Come up with a plan and then enact the plan, hire the right people for the particular projects, they should be okay. And something like this is very exciting. This almost, I don't even know if this has been done before. If you guys know if it's ever been done where it goes across, movies, games, books, comics, let me know in the comment section, because I don't think that any franchise has ever done anything like that. And, you have to really stop and think about just how innovative Lucasfilm has always been. Because everybody goes on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Star Wars was doing that back in the 90s, with the books and everything. And they started doing this whole somewhat cross-platform kind of thing where they opened up the universe and, you had things, a storyline might start in a book and pick up in a comic, and then they reference it in a movie. That was all done even back then. And to, I think, a more successful degree, it's happening now. I mean, Marvel certainly set the stage as far as the film universes, the cinematic universes go, but Star Wars is really doing it for a while. So keep an eye out for Project Luminous. Of course, we're definitely going to talk about it once they make the announcement. So make sure you subscribe to our channel so you get all the latest news on this one. Okay, so next, we actually have some leaked footage, which you can get in the show notes, by the way. We'll put a link to it. But there was some leaked footage from that George Lucas live-action TV series that was going to come out not too long after the Clone Wars. I don't know if you guys remember or not, but way back when the Clone Wars was being developed, and, you know, they were talking about, okay, we're going to do some Star Wars television. They basically had a thing to where the Clone Wars was going to be the primary thing, but then George was actually working on what was supposed to be the first live-action TV series ever for Star Wars. And, of course, now we know that goes to The Mandalorian, but he was working on this whole thing that was going to be about the whole Underworld and everything at Coruscant, and kind of like the whole, you know, seedy things that were going on or whatever. And it was almost like it was going to be kind of like a crime drama in a way. You know, it was not a whole lot of information about it, honestly. But once George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney, Disney opted not to pick it up. And then, you know, the project was killed. Well, a few days ago, we actually, you know, I was just checking around YouTube, and I found that they actually had some test footage that was released from this project. And I mean, it wasn't just like, you know, little bits of scenes here and there. I mean, it's legitimately this whole big chunk, you know, like a 5-minute chunk of the footage, like part of a storyline. I mean, it's got finished effects. It's got, you know, music. It's got the dialogue. It actually is a completely finished scene. And Disney didn't want to do it because it was going to be a little bit too expensive to do. So I have a feeling what they were going to do is it was almost like a proof of concept kind of a thing. It was almost like, okay, if we're going to do this, can we do it? And can we do it on a television style budget? And obviously the answer was probably no, but it looked really interesting. I mean, I got to tell you, it kind of had a Rogue One vibe to me. That's actually what it seemed like. It was kind of like, if you guys remember the early scenes of Rogue One, you know, when Cassian was, you know, kind of running around and he was meeting that contact and everything, and then, you know, spoiler alert, he actually kills the contact. It had that vibe to it. I mean, honestly, it was really kind of a thrilling thing to watch. I mean, it kept you a little bit on the edge of your seat. It was surprising. I honestly, you know, stopped watching it after, as they also go on and they show you all this behind the scenes stuff, which is, it was interesting too, but I was really more into checking out the, you know, the actual finished footage from the show. And I got to tell you, I thought it was great. I was really looking forward to it, you know, kind of like, man, I wish this would have actually been a series now. So who knows? Hopefully, maybe if there's enough positive fan reaction, Disney will produce something along those lines, or maybe they'll even take the scripts, because remember, George Lucas had like 100 scripts done for the show, so there could have been like 100 episodes that they could easily produce and put on Disney Plus. And I mean, the production value looks, I don't know how expensive it is compared to The Mandalorian, but it looked like it was around the same, you know, the same cost maybe. I don't know, it's really hard to say. It really depends. But, you know, check out, you know, look in our show notes in the description and check the footage out, and then leave a comment in the comment section below and let me know what you guys thought of it. All right, well now, even though it's just going to be me doing it, it's time for Duel of the Fates. All right, this week on Duel of the Fates, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about eras of Star Wars. Okay, so what I want to know, what you guys, is if Lucasfilm is going to do a TV series or a movie, which era would you rather have it set in? The Old Republic or the High Republic? Now, for those of you guys who don't know what the High Republic is, because this is somewhat of a new thing, because a couple of months ago, Disney released some information talking about how the next movie they were going to do was going to be released in the High Republic. And everybody was like, what's the High Republic? Well, it turns out it's about it's sometime between 1,000 years before A New Hope and 400. It actually takes place around like 400 years before A New Hope. Pretty much the Battle of Yavin. That's usually how they measure time when they do Star Wars timeline. You'll see like BBY, that's before Battle of Yavin. So Battle of Yavin is kind of like a year zero for Star Wars. So, you know, here we got like the scene from the Old Republic, which takes place 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, all the way up to about 1,000 years before. So that's a huge chunk of time. I mean, they could do all kinds of stuff with the Old Republic. The High Republic, on the other hand, while there's still a pretty good chunk of time in there, you know, it's somewhere between like 600 and 400 years before the Battle of Yavin. I don't know if there's as much. I mean, granted, they could probably, and this is probably why they're doing it, to be honest. I think they want to actually get a young Yoda in there, especially when you look at how popular Baby Yoda is. So that's probably what it is. But I'm curious on how they're going to handle certain other elements of this whole thing. Because if you think about it, while the general audience has maybe heard of the Old Republic, they're not as familiar with it. The Old Republic actually has a lot of source material out there. I mean, obviously, we had the Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 games. You have a series of Old Republic novels that have come out. You have other references in other games. So you have quite a little bit of a character list that you could go by, you know, for the Old Republic. And honestly, I was hoping that that was what the Benioff and Weiss movie was going to be about. You know, I was hoping that they were going to do this whole Old Republic movie, and I personally would love to see Revan, you know, and all the other characters, all the wonderful characters. What was that droid's name that I love so much? HK-47, I think. I don't know if you guys remember. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, but in the HK series, a droid stood for Hunter Killer. I thought that was incredible. I thought it was a great concept. He kind of reminded me, actually, of a new canon droid, Mr. Bones, that you see in the Aftermath trilogy. It's kind of that same dark, demented humor. Or there's like a C-3PO, there's like a protocol droid in the Darth Vader comics that's kind of similar. He's like this like killer 3PO type droid, and he has that same like bloodthirsty, you know, dark sense of humor or whatever. But that's the kind of stuff that you get in the Old Republic. Now, the High Republic, being that it's a little bit closer to the trilogy we know, my only problem with that is I think they're playing it a little too safe. It's almost like they're just, I don't know, it's like Disney just doesn't want to get away from the original trilogy too much. You know, they don't want to stray away from it too much. And honestly, I think that's a mistake. I really think that they should try to get as far away from it as possible, tell new stories. You can connect certain things. I mean, it's still the Star Wars universe. You still tell it in a style that's very much like Star Wars. And I think that you could be successful doing it. I don't think that you have to, you know, constantly put a young this or a young that in it. You don't have to constantly reference all the original trilogy characters. It worked in the sequel trilogy, but, you know, as our podcast, you know, last week, if you guys saw it or not, we talked about what worked and what didn't in the sequel trilogy. One of the things that didn't work for us was the fact that they just did not get far enough away from, you know, the classic characters and the story beats and everything that they probably should have. Now, again, I get it. It's a sequel trilogy. It's still the Skywalker saga, but it was like, on one hand, The Force Awakens maybe copied it a little too much. On the other hand, The Last Jedi maybe went a little too far. You definitely have to play within certain parameters when you're dealing with Star Wars. No question about it. But I just think that it would be healthy for them to do something like the Old Republic. Because that way, you are so far removed from the events and the characters of the original trilogy that you can literally start from scratch and just do a whole new thing, but you're still doing it in the classic Star Wars style. So I'm going with Old Republic. That's what I would rather see. It looks like they're going to do this High Republic movie, though. I'm sure it'll be good. It's still far enough away that I think it'll be different enough. But I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But you guys should let me know in the comments section what you guys are thinking. You want the Old Republic and maybe bring in some of the characters from the games that we all know and love? Or are you curious about this High Republic era? Do you want to see something maybe a little bit closer, a little bit familiar, far enough away to be, new and exciting, but close enough that it's not too foreign? Let me know in the comments section what you guys thought. All right, so now it's time to go to our main topic, from a certain point of view. This is where we discuss, usually in depth. It's going to be a little less in depth because there's only one of me this week, but that's okay. We still got a lot of great things to talk about. So, The Rise of Kylo Ren. The Rise of Kylo Ren is this new comic series that came out. They're on their second issue now, and I've read both issues 1 and 2. And essentially what this is trying to do is show us, how did Kylo Ren get from being Ben Solo, who, as we all know, is Luke and Leia, Han and Leia's son. See, I'm thinking of The Empire Strikes Back again. Han and Leia's son, he was being trained as a Jedi by Luke, and then when we see him in The Force Awakens, it's like, okay, he's under Snoke's influence, and, he's like this total dark side guy now, and it's like, while you're watching Force Awakens, you're sitting there going, okay, I understand what's going on, but how did all this happen? And remember, we were sitting there always speculating, too, like, who is Snoke? Now, of course, spoiler alert, I can't talk today. We do find out Snoke's origins in The Rise of Skywalker, but we don't know how he actually befriended Kylo Ren until now. So, issue number 1 predominantly deals with the events that occur right after Luke tries to kill Kylo while he's sleeping. We remember that we found this out in The Last Jedi, that, Luke sensed the dark side in him, was getting really, really scared by that whole thing, and was just like, okay, that's it. I can't let this happen again. And so he basically, tries to end his life. He ignites his lightsaber, comes bearing down on him, and of course, Ben Solo pretty much blocks it and then proceeds to destroy the temple. And this is where issue number 1 picks up. He's sitting in the ashes of the temple. The temple is on fire, it's burning, and 3 of his students, well, not his students, but Luke's students, so, basically his peers, who happen to be off-world at the time, fly in and see what happens, and they see Ben Solo, and they're like, what's going on? And of course, Ben tells him, well, Luke tried to kill me, and so I had to kill him. Because at that point, nobody could feel Luke in the Force, so they're thinking that he's dead. So naturally, there's a little bit of a conversation. Ben Solo basically is like, look, I don't really want to kill you guys. They're not really having it, so, they try to fight him. And it's interesting to note that even though Ben does do things like disable their ship and, use the Force on him, he's trying not to kill him or kill them. And that I thought was really interesting. I thought it was really cool that, in spite of the fact that we know how Kylo Ren turns out, he really did start out pretty pure, I guess would be the best term. Like, he really just wanted to be the best Jedi he could be. And unfortunately, his ego is setting in. He's saying, look, Luke wanted us to all think of ourselves as equal, but we all know that I was really the best, and on it goes. And so then he ends up flying out, and he goes to his friend Snoke. And Snoke is on this, this weird, like, organic-looking space station. Has all this, it's kind of like Dagobah in a space station. And, Snoke is kind of encouraging him slowly, like, yeah, I know you want to be this light guy, but, look at where it's getting you. That's the gist of it. I don't want to do too much of a giveaway here, because I want you guys to actually read this comic series and enjoy it. But Snoke pretty much encourages him and basically says, okay, you have to go and face the Knights of Ren. Now, I should note that the whole comic, issue number 1, actually opens up with the Knights of Ren. There's a guy in this mask, and his name is Ren, and it shows how these guys were trying to join them, and, it didn't turn out so well for them. And so Snoke was basically like, if you really want to know who it is that you truly are, and if you really want to learn the secrets that will really help you, i.e. the dark side, you need to go and get trained by these guys. And that's where we leave off in issue 1. Now, issue 2 picks up with kind of the same thing, where it's almost like it picks up immediately where issue 1 leaves off. And issue 2 I think is really cool, because it really shows Ben Solo conflicted, much like he was in The Force Awakens, except in The Force Awakens, he was a dark side guy who was being tempted by the light. Here, by nature, he's a pretty good guy. He is arrogant. He is prideful. But he's trying to do the right thing. He's thinking that the Jedi are allied. There's a lot of Anakinisms, if that's a word. If it's not, I'm making it a word. There's a lot of Anakin-like behavior, where he starts to think that the Jedi are evil and that their way is lies, and even his name is a lie. One of my favorite parts of the comic is where he's talking to Snoke, and he's like, because I think Snoke was kind of like, but your name is legendary or something. He was like, okay, yeah, my name is Ben from Obi-Wan, who I've never met. He's this great Jedi, but I've never met him. He doesn't really mean anything to me. And he's like, as far as the last name Solo, it's not even my dad's real last name. So the whole name is a lie to him. And I thought that was really fascinating. It really is a much better comic series than I expected. I would put it right up there with the Vader series. Definitely, hands down. It's starting out with a lot of promise. It then flashes back to when Kylo initially met the Knights of Ren, when the Knights of Ren tried to attack Luke. That is worth buying the comic by itself, if for no other reason. Because, everybody kind of wanted to see Luke Skywalker go up against the Knights of Ren in Episode 9. You get it in this comic, and it does not disappoint. It's really cool. I'm not going to give away anything about it. I'm not going to spoil it in any way. Just understand it's a really, really good scene. In fact, when you guys read it, or if you've already read it yourselves, let me know in the comment section what you guys thought. So anyway, it goes back, and then, of course, it comes back to the present time. And now Kylo is going to seek out the Knights of Ren and talk to them. And it's picking it up with the next issue. So it's a really good series. And I would encourage you guys, for a long time, I didn't read the comics. I'll be honest. I was reading the novels, and I would also get other companion books like the encyclopedias and all that other stuff. And to me, the comics just felt like too much of an investment. But I have to tell you, after reading the Vader series, some of the Lando series, the Afro series, all these series, they're so good. I would definitely recommend you guys starting to read the comics. And the other cool thing about the comics in the new canon is that they fill in a bunch of information in a very cool way. One of the things that was kind of cool was when they found this Jedi temple in issue number 2. Luke talks about Jocasta Nu, and how, wow, this even has more stuff than, she had or whatever. And it's like, once again, it kind of gave me the same chills that I got when I was watching The Last Jedi and Luke actually said the name Darth Sidious. I don't know. It's kind of geeky, I get it, but I just kind of think it's cool when, original trilogy characters reference the prequels. I don't know. I just think it's cool. But anyway, if you guys have read any of the comics, jump down in the comment section and let me know what comics you guys recommend. I highly recommend that you start reading, though, The Rise of Kylo Ren. All that's out right now is issues 1 and 2. It will not take you very much time to catch up. So run out there and buy it. And then when you do, read it and leave a comment in the comment section and let me know what you guys think. All right, well, now it is time for my favorite segment, Clear Your Mind. That's right. This is where you guys get to submit your questions to us, and we answer them. And a lot of times, it's not even so much, because there's been times where we don't know the answers to some of these questions, to be honest. But it's all about sparking a discussion. That's what this whole channel is about. Discussing Star Wars with you guys, creating a little community, and, just creating this whole big discussion group is essentially what it is. So that's why we love to get your questions, and that's it's actually one of my favorite segments of the show. All right, so the first one was sent anonymously, and it was basically, which do you prefer, the Legends series of books or the Canon series of books? That's a tough one. That really is. So I got this from QRA, it's basically QUORA.com. It's spelled like Quora or whatever, but it's actually QRA. So sometimes people send us questions through that. And I have to tell you that the whole Legends versus Canon debate, I know there was a lot of people, myself included, that was disappointed when Disney basically said, you know what, we're no longer going to do the whole, like all the expanded universe novels are now Legends and they don't count. And it's like, great, I invested all this time reading these books and now suddenly they aren't canon. But a lot of people forget that in the old expanded universe, which is now Legends, George didn't consider all that canon either. He would actually go through and say, okay, this storyline, like for instance, the Timothy Zahn trilogy, he considered canon. But there was a lot of other books that he didn't. One of them, I believe, was The Courtship of Princess Leia. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that he considered that canon. That might be one of the examples. I, Jedi, I think, may have been. That was a really good book in the expanded universe, by the way. There's all kinds. I mean, unfortunately, with Legends, you had the issue of you would have really good, well-written books, but then you would also have books that were just insanely silly. Or in the case of what ended up becoming the entire Yuuzhan Vong series, which was an excellent series that I really wish Disney would, make a movie or a Disney Plus series or something, or even bring them back in the novels like what they've done with Thrawn. That would be great. But the thing about Legends is that you have to look at what it did for Star Wars. It revitalized Star Wars. Star Wars, while it was still a pop culture phenomenon and the movies were popular, it was out of the public consciousness. It was sort of like on the back burner. Whereas when the Legends books started coming out, right with Timothy Zahn and his version of Episode 7, which was Heir to the Empire, it reignited the entire franchise, and it generated a ton of interest in it again. And then they started releasing more novels, and then that led to, different specials. And then, of course, then you had the prequel trilogy. So in that dead spot between Return of the Jedi and the prequel trilogy, which was like 16 years, you had the Legend series actually carrying the torch and coming out with great stories. And that's really what we were all hoping when Disney bought Lucasfilm, is like, look, take the Timothy Zahn trilogy, which is Heir of the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command, and make that 7, 8, and 9. I mean, you have the story built in right there. Even some of the more recent Legends books, like the whole Darth Bane series, fantastic. The Darth Plagueis novel, which, I mean, we're all begging for that to be canon. Because Disney does have the ability to just look at one of the expanded universe books and say, okay, it's canon. You know, whether they do or not, they've cherry-picked little story ideas from it. Actually, if you really stop and think about it, the whole Kylo Ren character is, in essence, I think Darth Caedus is his name. It was basically Jason Solo, Han's son, in the expanded universe, turned to the dark side and became a Sith Lord. So there's a lot of similar storylines to it. Now, on the other side of it, we have the new canon. And I'll tell you right now, I think the new canon is the best. Only because, while there's a lot of great arguments for the expanded universe, and I share them, they're great stories. There's a lot of really great things there. But the problem that I had, and this is why I'm going to go with new canon, because it's almost like Duel of the Fates. I'm going to go with new canon only because the storylines in new canon are really good. They're more organic, down-to-earth type stories. They're streamlined, and the continuity is a lot tighter. Yes, there's a couple of scenes in particularly the Force Awakens novel. At the end of the Force Awakens novel, Poe and Rey meet, whereas in the movies, that's contradicted because they don't meet until The Last Jedi. So you do have little things like that. But for the most part, it's a really tightened continuity. You know, it's very streamlined. And the stories are very well written, and they're more organic and down to earth, and you don't have as much of the silly stuff. Whereas the problem that you had with the old Expanded Universe series is it started to paint itself into a corner. You know, it was sort of like everybody was trying to come up with all these different stories. Lucasfilm couldn't keep up, and consequently, you know, it became a lot more difficult for writers to come up with new stories, particularly after the Yuuzhan Vong trilogy. I wish. Which, of course, brings me to my problem with that. It was something like 21 or 22 books. It did not have to be that long. There was so much dead weight in the Yuuzhan Vong storyline. They could have streamed that down to probably like maybe 8 books, 5, something like that. But they chose to let it go on and on and on, and it went into all these crazy, you know, directions or whatever. And look, I recognize that there's a lot of people that hold the expanded universe near and dear to their heart, but I don't know, the way I see it, I think the new canon is much better. The storytelling's a lot tighter. You know, the continuity is there. And I just think that, you know, we're getting a lot of really good stories out of it. So let me know what you guys think. Do you like the expanded universe better? Do you wish that they would canonize more novels from that? Or are you guys fans of the new canon novels too? All right. So our next question comes from Javan Rodriguez. And it is, do you have a problem with the power? It's like he calls it the power creep in Star Wars. You know, in the original trilogy, the largest feat was lifting an X-Wing, while in The Rise of Skywalker, you know, the Force has been taken beyond to an even higher level. That's what he's basically saying. And I can understand that because, look, if you even go back to The Force Unleashed, you know, you had some pretty epic uses of the Force where they're bringing down Star Destroyers, you know, even in the original Clone Wars cartoons, and those like little, you know, 2-3 minute shorts or whatever, you know, you'd have Yoda waving his hand and hundreds of clone troopers or whatever would just, or droids rather, where's my mind today, you know, would just go flying or whatever. And it's crazy. I mean, you know, even in The Rise of Skywalker, yeah, you got, you know, like Kylo and Rey are fighting over an actual like transport. And these are just like crazy uses of the Force. But here's what you got to remember, and this is what I usually try to point out. When we first are introduced to the Force in the original trilogy, let's not go chronologically. Let's just go to the original trilogy. when we first are introduced to the Force, you have to remember that the Force had been essentially, you didn't have any Jedi or Sith or anything. You had Darth Vader, and then you had Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Luke Skywalker. Now, it's true, there were other pockets of Jedi, but it wasn't like people were studying and, trying to improve their Force powers. I mean, they were actually, if anything, trying not to use the Force. So, I mean, you had a situation where people weren't really trying to advance it, right? In the prequel era, where it was like the absolute height of it, I could understand maybe you making an argument that why do you have all these crazy Force powers in the post-Return of the Jedi world versus at a time when the Jedi were at their zenith. I can hang with that. But at the same time, I think it's sort of like how the world is today. We just have more access to information, right? And I think that at that time, it was like the Jedi were, during the prequel era, were basically doling out the information and what they wanted people to know. I don't necessarily think that when they were training Jedi, they would want them to know how to pull down an entire ship or anything like that. Whereas Luke just had all the Jedi texts. He had like everything, all the holocrons, texts. He went around and he found all these like artifacts that had been lost for generations, even that predates the prequels. And now Rey ends up with all that stuff. And it's the same thing with, on the dark side, Sidious was obsessed with the sorcery and, the more, I guess like, almost magical type properties of the Force versus some of the more general ones. That's one of the reasons why he hardly ever uses a lightsaber, although he was an incredible combatant, according to canon. He just really didn't rely on it that much. He was more into the more, wizardry and magical aspects of it. So I think you really have to look at where they are. Time had passed. They're able to do a lot more. And so they can learn a lot more. And I just think that, well, yes, I could see some of it being a little bit difficult to understand. You also have to remember that even in the expanded universe, and keep in mind, these are novels that were written predominantly in the 90s. You had Luke in one book, I can't remember which one it was, but he was like guiding a lightsaber through a ship and, mowing down a bunch of people. And then you had Luke himself like pulling down a planet. It was just, there's been a lot of exorbitant uses of the Force, even in the novels. Nobody really seemed to have a problem with it then, but it isn't until the sequel trilogy comes out that everybody, is a little bit crazy. And if you think about it, it's not like they're doing like that much. Force healing has been around for a long time. The whole little Force astral projection thing, that's kind of new. But still, that's not so like some of the stuff you saw even in The Force Unleashed, which came out like 20 years ago. So you have to put this stuff into perspective. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for our show this week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the solo show. I have to admit, without my partner in crime, Darryl, with me, it was a little bit different. But hey, I always love talking Star Wars with you guys. So hopefully he's back with us next week. But if he's not, you guys know I'll be here. So make sure that you tune in, you watch, you subscribe, you hit the like button for this video, hit the notification bell, hit us up at Head to Head SW on all our social media platforms. We got Twitter, we got Facebook, we got Instagram. We love to talk to you guys in any of this stuff. And you guys come up with some really good, topics and good comments. So make sure you hit us up. I'm Eric Vansel, and we will see you next week. May the Force be with you always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Head to Head SW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you always.